Ambassador Oren, do you believe this moment is different, that there is going to be peace? I wonder, and I ask this because we hear from President Trump, we hear from other leaders in the Middle East saying over and over again, this is peace, the war is over. We heard that from President Herzog in Israel. We're not hearing that same language necessarily from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
I think the moment is one where the possibility for peace has existed perhaps more tangibly than it has, perhaps even in generations. The last peace agreement between Israel and the Palestinians was in 1998, not long ago, signed between Yasser Arafat and Benjamin Netanyahu. It's people don't remember that Netanyahu was the last person to sign an agreement with the Palestinians. So there's a possibility here, but it all hinges on one fulfillment of these 20 points that have developed by President Trump and his team, by Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, and that is the demilitarization of Gaza. That is taking the guns away from Hamas. If that doesn't happen, I can't imagine that international forces, technocrats, administrators will come into Gaza. No one's willing to die for Gaza, and therefore the next step is absolutely crucial if the other steps are to be fulfilled. And those other steps call for not just the reconstruction of Gaza, but also the possibility of a diplomatic horizon for the Palestinians in the West Bank, stability throughout the Middle East, the expansion of the Abraham Accords. All of that is kind of a domino effect, a positive domino effect, that will be set into motion once the guns are taken away from Hamas.
You know, on the Abraham Accords, I want to bring in former Israeli Arab negotiator and senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, Aaron David Miller. So, Aaron, last night you were saying you mentioned the word hope, which I've never heard you say before. I wonder if that hope is tempered today, seeing that Saudi Arabia was not present in Egypt, MBS was not present in Egypt, Iran invited, often complains about not being invited to this, but not present. Hamas not present. Bibi not present. Does that temper the expectations for what might happen next?
It may, but my hope, if that's what it is, it's great to be here, Katie, with you and with Michael. My hope is tempered to the reality that phase one contains a possible defusing of the three urgent dimensions why the world paid attention to Gaza to begin with. Number one, the hostages have been released. Maybe Hamas will comply with their obligation to find and return, tragically, those hostages who were killed. That's number one. Number two, the end of the hostage crisis really will remove, I think, the need, justification, and even credibility of a comprehensive military campaign that we've seen the Israelis launch in an effort to prosecute their war against Hamas, against Gaza City, against Khan Yunis, and against Rafah. And if that happens, if there in fact is a diminution of Israeli military activity and the kinetic environment improves, then you can actually see flooding the zone with humanitarian assistance, access to potable water, proper sanitation, medical assistance, and shelter and food. Beyond that, and Michael is right about the lift that's going to be required with respect to demilitarization and decommissioning. My concern, final point, is that the end state, the end objectives of the Netanyahu government and Hamas are still mutually irreconcilable. Hamas wants to survive as a political entity. They won't govern Gaza anymore, but they do want to take over the Palestinian national movement, and they will use Israeli annexationist policies on the West Bank to generate support for them. And, of course, the Netanyahu government's objective, understandably, not just to eradicate Hamas as a military organization, but to create a situation where you have an alternative Palestinian governance so Hamas cannot resurge. I don't see how right now you could bring 100 countries together at charm. I don't see how right now you can get over that particular mountain. But for the moment, Katie, hey, and Michael knows this very well, anything that occurs which produces durable gains between Israelis and Palestinians is quite an achievement.
Yeah, no, that's. I think that's correct to point that out. I do want to ask about, though, the far right. Ben-Gvir, ambassador, is backing a hostage father who says he wants the war to resume now that all of the hostages are back. There's also a question of why Benjamin Netanyahu did not go to Egypt. He said yes initially before, I believe, 20 minutes later saying no. He's citing the holiday in Israel. Do you buy that? Is it the holiday? Why did he not go?
Yeah, he probably initially said yes, and then his advisor said, well, wait a minute, it's a Jewish holiday this evening. You can't go. Now, let's remind ourselves, this is the Jewish state. And this particular holiday is like a Sabbath. You can't fly, you can't use the phone, you can't lose electricity. And that would put Benjamin Netanyahu, even if he wanted to go, at odds with the great number of Israelis who will be observing this holiday in a religious fashion, not using electricity, not going on cars, not going on planes. So yes, it politically would probably be improbable. I mean, in Israel, they're saying that many Arab leaders may not have sat with him in the same room. That I don't know, but the Jewish holiday is a plausible and a politically prudent excuse for not going. As for the impact of the Israeli right, it's going to be significant. Mr. Smotrich, who's often quoted as a source, as an extreme right source, he's doing very poorly in the polls. It's not even sure his party would make it into the next Knesset, but Ben Gvir's party has done pretty well and will be influential. The question is, what will be the nature of the next Israeli government and when those elections are going to be held? The next elections in Israel are scheduled to be held next October. They could be earlier if Netanyahu feels that his numbers are going up as a result of this agreement, as a result of the praise heaped on him by Donald Trump today in Knesset. It was quite extraordinary. But in any case, the next Israeli elections may not be determined in the main or perhaps even partially by what's happening with the Palestinians or about the war. It's about internal Israeli issues. Above all, the refusal of the ultra-Orthodox communities to be enlisted in the Israeli military and to integrate into the Israeli economy more broadly. And that is an issue that cuts across right and left lines. In fact, before the war, it was a leftist issue, and now it's actually a right-wing religious issue. And so the next elections, above and beyond the Palestinian issue, or even the whole question of peace in the Middle East, it'll be about internal Israeli social issues, such as ultra-Orthodox enlistment.
Well, let's also not forget that before the war started, there were massive protests on the street of Israel against an assault that people argued on the country's democracy and attempts to coerce or subjugate the Supreme Court. Kayla, I'm curious about President Trump. He's being credited greatly for putting pressure on all sides, but Benjamin Netanyahu specifically, to take a ceasefire, to get the hostages home. He keeps saying that the war is over. Do you understand me? The war is over. The war is over. He said it a number of times now. Is this him saying that he is now done with it as well, or will there continue to be pressure on Netanyahu and Hamas?
Well, one reason why people feel in the region that he's going to continue to have a commitment is because President Trump is chairing this board of peace. There's still a lot of questions about who exactly will sit on that board, but they feel him at the helm means that he is committed to long-term peace. A lot of those conversations are still yet to be had about who will sit on this board. We only know former Prime Minister of Britain, Tony Blair, will sit on it. Others potentially could be on it. Egyptian president today, he said that he would be interested in sitting on this board, but there's no timeline for this board to end. And that is also the case with an international peacekeeping force that the U.S. wants to see organized. There's a lot of questions about who will fund that effort, which countries will contribute troops to that effort. And again, it goes to this question of when does this all end? They're all designed to be temporary. President Trump has really dodged questions about a two-state solution and whether he would support one. He was really leaving that up to the discussions that are still yet to come. But really the key players to watch going forward is Egypt, Qatar, Turkey. They have played a huge role in negotiations up until this point and really served as intermediaries between the U.S. and Hamas. Those officials are really key to watch going forward.
And Aaron David Miller, what is your take on that?
Oh, my take on that, Katie, in my view, President Trump continues to undermine the very norms and institutions of constitutional governance, despite the fact that in his inaugural oath, he's legally obligated to protect them. At the same time, no American president, probably since Dwight Eisenhower, has been willing to exert this kind of pressure on an Israeli prime minister. It was inherently a pro-Israeli document, and the prime minister saw it and could make changes before. which has been standard operating procedure, the way we've behaved in negotiations in the past. I think if it's going to work, I think Donald Trump is going to have to show an extraordinary degree of focus and determination. And I worry here. He's already identified solving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as the 8th conflict that he's resolved. And I think this is going to absolutely be critically important in the weeks and months ahead, that he not lose his interest, that he maintain that focus. American leadership, by and large, I would argue, was the determining factor that led to today.
All right, Aaron David Miller, Ambassador Oren, Michael Oren, Michaela Gardner, and David Noriega, thank you very much for starting us off. Still ahead.